You're listening to Cards to the Moon, a podcast about trading cards from both a collector and investor perspective. We hope you'll stick around for the ride as we take a deep dive into the state of the hobby, share some hot takes, hopefully some useful advice, and fun stories along the way. Hey y'all, welcome back to Cards to the Moon. This is episode 140. My name is Clark from 5 Card Guys on Instagram and 5cardguys.com. With me co-hosting, as usual, is Hyung of Integrity Sports Cards and John, who is Trade You at Recess. Later this episode, we'll play our special guest interview with none other than Jeremy Lee of the popular Sports Card Live YouTube show. He's a true OG in the hobby and someone who provides great insight about the hobby in our chat that we had earlier today. But before we get into that, just quickly off the top, I wanted to bring up a couple of guys in the MLB who I'm wondering if we're sleeping on in the hobby. All right, maybe it's just me, but I just want to bring up these two guys quickly. First, it's Luis Arraez. Arraez? Is that how you say his last name?
Arraez? Yeah.
Who just last week was batting .401. That
Crazy.
grabbed some headlines. Yeah, you haven't seen that in a while. And we're at 40% to the season. It's come down since then, but he's still way in the lead with a .378 batting average as we record this show. I think the next closest is Ronald Acuna at .333, somewhere around there. So, yeah, his 2017 Bowman Chrome Prospect first Bowman auto, I saw that was recently sold, BGS 9.5, for $200.
Ooh.
So my question is, are we sleeping on him? Or, what happens if he flirts with the 400 average?
Okay, so here's my take. I really like Luis Arraez. Like, he's a stud. He's a type of player that has a little bit of old school Tony Gwynn, type, go the other way. Is not going to hit a lot of home runs, but he's going to, bleed you to the death on the left side of the infield, go the other way. And I don't know necessarily, I know the storyline was, he's chasing history with, hitting 400. But as a baseball, fan, I think he would be, someone that baseball players appreciate. But from a hobby standpoint, I think he'll get no love for a couple factors. I think, he started his career off in Minnesota, which, Minnesota, they never get love in the hobby, as well as Miami, right? Out of all places, right? So he obviously is doing his thing, but, even when he was with Minnesota, he was kind of out of position, right? He's you don't know if he's an everyday. Tried him at third, tried him in outfield. And, the only position that kind of made sense for him, and he's playing decent second base right now, was second base. So, and at that, he's starting to now become an average to above average, defender, I would say. Even probably he was a below average defender going into it, right? So you put all those factors in, and that's going to also affect his overall WAR, and stuff like that. So I see Arraez as a really good baseball player, but I don't think he's going to get hobby love, and his prices kind of dictate that, right? And I don't know, he could do this for the next 5 years. I don't think he's going to get the love until he does it to the point where he's retiring and he's becoming kind of like that Tony Gwynn type of player, right? So for me, I'm off of him just for that reason. Even though he's cheap, if you like him, if you're a fan of him, he's gonna hit 300 every year, I'll tell you that. As long as he stays healthy, right? But very one-dimensional to me in terms of what he brings to the table.
Johnny, what do you think?
I mean, obviously I'm not as versed in baseball as Hyung, but just as a casual fan watching, especially from a hobby perspective, the old Nike ad, chicks dig the long ball, this guy, he just he'll slap singles to death on you all day long, right? And
that's pretty sexy. Slap singles.
A punching Judy.
Yeah. He doesn't hit home runs, and I think that coupled with the fact that he's always on small market, not so popular teams. That just makes him out of sight, out of mind. So is he slept on? Yeah, sure. But at the same time, nobody's jumping on his card because I don't think anybody realistically sees any excitement or anything explode out of his cards. Now, if he ends up finishing the season actually obtaining the 400, that's a different story. And then that's something to really look out for. But for the time being, yeah, I don't know. It's tough.
Yeah. Yeah, I won't add too much time on it. I thought it was interesting that he was batting 401 last week, but we know how hard it is to hit 400 in this league. And he probably, if you're going to bet money, it's going to be under 400. So the best time you should have sold was last week when he was hitting 401. So sorry guys, you missed your chance. All right, let's spend a little more time on the second guy. The second player is NL Rookie of the Year, I believe, by the end of the season, the way he's hitting, the way he's running. Of course, I'm talking about Corbin Carroll of the Arizona Diamondbacks. His 2019 Bowman Chrome First Auto, BGS 9.5, True Gem Plus recently sold for about $500. Seems cheap to me for some reason.
500, yeah, that seems a little cheap. I think there's going to be a premium for, especially right now, because the way he's playing. Corbin Carroll's market was a little different, where there was some hype around him coming into it, especially with the Wander, same year as Wander year, but Corbin Carroll was in Bowman draft, right? So, Carroll, he's a stud. We've talked about him on previous episodes. There's another guy, I'm telling you, Pete Crow Armstrong. He's coming up too. He's a very similar type player. I would say he's not on the Cubs. He's not as good as, I would say, Corbin Carroll, but very, very similar player. And I got to see Corbin Carroll in 2018. That's why it's like, I remember, he was on the same team as Witt and Volpe, which is stupid. Like, it's unfair, but Corbin Carroll was unbelievable because he brings the other side of the game. The running game is incredible. The defense, the highlight reel, home runs. This guy's 5'10", 175 pounds soaking wet. He has 14 bombs, he's, almost slugging, or his OPS plus is almost at 1,000. And this is his rookie season, right? And I don't see him stopping. And, Arizona also, they made a bold statement by giving him that $111 million contract, 8 years, kind of similar to Acuna. It's like before they even show what people thought was outrageous contract and a large amount of money, but he's at like a 3.5 WAR or whatever right now, and before midseason, I think he's definitely worth the money. His card values, I think they're on the higher side from where they were. I think there was a great buying opportunity before the season. I will say this though, with Series 2 releasing, you have additional rookie cards for Corbin Carroll. Would that affect the Bowman Chrome market now that there's more options, right? If you're a Corbin Carroll collector, or you're trying to invest in a piece, maybe there's more options now. It might, dictate the price. So I think you're still buying at a premium, even though there might be good deals to be had. Like, for instance, a BGS 9.5 Bowman Chrome for 500. I think it's very reasonable, but like I said, it's tough because he does play on Arizona. But they have upcoming prospects like Jordan Lawler. So guys that are big time names. So I think that might change, the Arizona narrative a bit, moving forward. And if they continue to, win and produce, and Corbin Carroll becomes one of those players that are impactful, I think he's a superstar. He's proven that he's a superstar. Yeah. And if he's hitting 30 home runs a year and he's 22 years old, he's going to be a 30-30 guy this year in his rookie year at 22 years old, right? So that's just to give you context of even the difference between a guy like Luis Arraez versus a Corbin Carroll. Why get excited about Corbin Carroll, even though his prices are a lot more, expensive than Arraez, right? So.
No, thanks for that context. Before, Johnny, you say, what do you think? You think his power's legit? Like, I know he is a smaller guy.
His power's legit. His power's legit. Yeah. I think so. I think
that's all I need to know.
You know why? Because like I was looking at the Baseball America scouting report when he was in high school, because he was a hit school signee, and this guy, well, he hit 3 home runs in down in Panama when we were there, and he hit one off us, but you know, someone that young to be able to hit consistently in professional. Like if you look at his minor league numbers, he's hit 16 home runs in a season in like 400 at bats. So, and he's continuing that pace in AA, AAA, and big leagues. There's no drop off in pace. And that's why it's like, that's how you know you amazing. And at the time they had him at a 50 power. So major league average power, you know, I'd say above average power, but then I think he's proving this year, because that was the question. Will he have 30 plus home run power? If he hits 30 home runs this year, I think it's going to totally change. All
right. I like that.
I don't have much to add, except I remember this was a 1v1. I believe a listener sent in asking whether he should pick Corbin Carroll or the other guy was some dark horse, might have been like a PC player.
Yeah.
Really hope he picked Corbin Carroll, because I think at that time the PSA 10 was like $300 or whatever it was. So yeah, that's all I gotta say.
I'm like, I can't remember what I chose. I hope I chose Corbin Carroll.
I think I think it was a Corbin Carroll sweep, if I remember.
Okay, good. All right,
nice.
No, that's what I want to hear. Is power's legit, and I honestly I think it's cheap, and you know I like that comp. He's of Ronald Acuna, speed power combo. And look at Ronald Acuna's prices now, right? Like he's on an MVP track this year.
Yeah.
And you know, if for me Ronald Acuna is too expensive now. I didn't pull the trigger earlier, but I think Corbin Carroll is a good consolation prize. You know, so that's what I think. All right, we'll see. We'll keep an eye on both Luis Arraez and Corbin Carroll, see what they do for the rest of the season, and then we'll see what the hobby thinks of their cards. All right, with that, let's go ahead and play our interview with Jeremy Lee. All right, as we said off the top of the show, we have another special guest on the pod today. And for many of our listeners, he almost needs no introduction because he's all over the hobby, making valuable content with his YouTube show, Sports Card Live. He's a lifelong collector since 1980, as his Instagram bio states, and just a great ambassador for the hobby. We've talked with a lot of our hobby friends, both in Canada and the US, and anyone who knows Jeremy only speaks positive things about him. So without further ado, Jeremy Lee, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you guys for having me. It's nice to be here. Nice to meet you fellas.
Yeah, great having you on. Okay, as I mentioned, I feel like a lot of us know who you are already because of the sheer amount of content you put out. But I always like to start from the beginning with all our guests. And first, I want to ask you how you got into the hobby as a collector, kind of your origin story. And then when did it become in some ways more than a hobby for you, where, you know, you're now involved in so many different aspects of the hobby, like being a dealer, creating content, and tag grading. We'll get into some of those things in a minute. But yeah, how did it all start for you?
Well, just as a kid, like it did for a lot of people, you know, very end of the 70s, early 80s, going to hockey games and then seeing cards at my cousin's house and picking them up and being like, oh, this is cool. These are the players that I would see at the games. I used to go to games in the late 70s with my dad when I was like a little guy. Mm-hmm. And, you know, just learning to read and numbers. And it really started from there. And then as I, you know, got a bit older, started getting an allowance from my parents every week. I'd go to the corner store and buy packs of O-Pee-Chee hockey, Topps basketball, Topps baseball. It would have been the 1980 basketball, the 80, 81, 82 Topps baseball, and then all the O-Pee-Chee hockey sets. So like in the 80s, I would just build the base sets for hockey, and I never really built the basketball and baseball sets. The baseball was too big, but I'd build all the hockey sets every year. And then fast forward to the early 90s, had a shop in Winnipeg from like 91 to 94, right during the junk wax era. And then kind of, you know, slowed down the second half of the 90s. But then in 2000, I think it was 2000, maybe 99, 2000, I was like right back in it hardcore, started working in a career, and then just kept on going, buying lots of cards, collecting. And then we moved into like, you know, the auto patch era. So I started really being intrigued by those and pack pulled autographs. And I was really involved in that. In 2012, I acquired a website called hobbyinsider.net, a community. I still own it to this day, which really just makes me the lead administrator. It runs on donations. And so that kind of put me in touch with more people. I was up on the radar of the card companies at that, well, especially like Beckett and Upper Deck at that point.
Sure.
And then what happened? So then, I guess fast forward right to 2020 and the pandemic, and I started Sports Cards Live one day. There's a whole story behind that, but in essence, I wanted to sell some cards online. I wanted to sell some graded vintage cards, and I didn't want to sell them on a platform. I didn't want to scan and do all that stuff. So, and list on eBay. So I reached out to a vintage hockey group moderator. I said, hey, can I sell some cards? Can I just live stream to your group and sell cards? And they said, sure, you can't show anything after 1989. So a couple nights later, I went live in their group. I don't know how many people were watching, maybe 30 or 40. And I would just like hold up a card. All right, this is a 1980 Mark Messier rookie, $400. There's a 1985 Lemieux rookie, $800. And I sold a whole bunch of cards that way. And then after, I got a bunch of messages being like, that was awesome. You should do that again. It was kind of like Whatnot before Whatnot was.
I was going to say.
Right? If only I was as entrepreneurial as they were, I might have started something like that. But anyway, I did that. And then I'm like, well, now I want to sell modern cards. And there's a million modern hockey Facebook groups. So how do you pick one? So I thought maybe I'll start a new Facebook group where people can just go and live stream show cards. Again, Whatnot type of thing. I said, and I'll call it Sports Cards Live. So I went to YouTube, to Facebook, and I was able to get the group name. And then I thought, well, that's a pretty good name. So let's go to YouTube and see if the channel name's available. Lo and behold, it was. So I locked that down. Nice. And then I had to decide, all right, so I'm going to go live on YouTube. What am I going to do? And I called up my friend Corbin Chung, who, is the created, who he created Exquisite in the Cup, and was with Upper Deck and then Panini and now GTS. And I said, hey, Carv, I'm going to go live on YouTube on Saturday. That would have been April the 18th, 2020. I said, do you want to come on? I'll interview you. I'd never done an interview before. I'm like, do you want to come on? I'll interview you. And I also knew that by bringing him on, I would appeal to both basketball and hockey collectors because he invented Exquisite, right?
Yeah.
So he said, sure. So we went live that Saturday. 2 nights before I did episode 1, I just went on and just kind of said who I was and what I was planning to do. I've never gone back and watched that, but that would have been like the intro episode.
Right.
And that basically is what kicked off Sports Cards Live. After interviewing Carvin, I realized, well, I probably need to interview someone else for episode 2. And then I just it just went from there.
Sure.
Which then led me to, you asked about tag grading. That's what led me to Tag, because they found me just by my show, my podcast, and they approached me at the National in 2021 and said, hey, here's what we're up to. What do you think? And I looked at their presentation on the iPad. And I was blown away. And I had recently done an episode on like the potential for automated AI grading. Kind of concluded it was probably not feasible, too expensive, would take too long to produce.
Right.
Here we are. These guys have been investing in it and producing, developing it for 10 years. And, a year later, I did 5 episodes with them. And then a couple months after that, I joined them officially. So
nice.
There you go.
I appreciate that backstory. And, it's great hearing that, because from what the kids would say, you're a true OG in the hobby. And a lot of our guests, we've probably had about 15, 20 guests on ourselves now. We started our podcast, a couple years ago?
2 years,
I think we're approaching our 2nd year anniversary as well. And the stories are very similar. We all collected as kids, just like yourself, Jeremy, but we all got back into the hobby during the pandemic. And then, it was just this blow up, and we're still here. We still love collecting. I know a lot of our friends have left, actually. I'm sure, people that have come and gone as well. But hearing that you've been, I didn't even know you had a card shop in the 90s, and that's kind of cool to hear. Even talking with, Will from Dolly's, people that own card stores now, it's just kind of cool to hear their experience. So, appreciate that backstory. Something our listeners, and actually most of our listeners, I feel like it's the same for you. Most of our listeners are based out of the US for some reason. The internet, it goes all across the world. But we're both based out of Canada, right? So we're a podcast based out of Canada, but we actually talk a lot about baseball cards. And maybe it's because for us, it's the 92-93 Blue Jays World Series champions influence, right? Growing up, we like to, cheer for a winner.
And the red Donruss. The 1990 Donruss.
Yeah, exactly.
And the yellow clear.
Yeah, exactly.
I love it. But we also actually get requests from our listeners to talk more hockey cards. And I couldn't think...
Let me just tell you though, Clark, I also like baseball wise, I was a big baseball fan in the 80s and into the early 90s. And I mean, those Blue Jay 91-92 World Series, I mean, that was huge for me and my friend in Winnipeg at the time. So I was a huge Blue Jays fan then. I don't really follow it so closely anymore unless they're in the playoffs, but that was a big time for me too. And that's when I love that era of baseball. Absolutely.
So it's funny that we still love baseball, but we do get a lot of requests from our listeners, probably our Canadian listeners, to talk more hockey cards. And I couldn't think of a better person to ask than you, Jeremy. I've actually come across your booth a couple times at the Sports Card Expo, and your hockey card collection is pretty amazing. So one question I had about the hockey card market is, and actually this is good timing since the Las Vegas Golden Knights, they just won the Stanley Cup. And, we know Gary Bettman, the NHL commissioner. He's always looking to expand the sport of hockey and grow the market in the US for obvious financial reasons. In a similar way, do you think the hockey card market can really take off outside of Canada and in particular in the US?
I sure hope so. I guess there's a couple things there, right? Obviously, Fanatics acquired all the sports except for hockey. So I don't know how much hockey will benefit from their marketing power, but I think there will be some residual gains for hockey because they will be promoting sports cards. And a lot of people do like hockey, believe it or not. There are like, okay, so Vegas won the cup. I think that's good. They don't have any huge stars on that team, so that might not, they won't get that added benefit. But, Dallas has a great young team. Florida has a great team, obviously.
Sure.
So I think so, because first of all, we're fortunate as us who are predominantly hockey collectors are fortunate because, in my opinion, Upper Deck makes the nicest cards. And the look and feel, the quality, the manufacturer's quality, like they're, I don't know. I just really think they make the nicest looking cards. And I'm seeing more and more basketball collectors and baseball collectors on Instagram starting to collect hockey cards, and some prominent collectors as well. So, the more and more Instagram accounts and TikTok accounts and YouTube channels and podcasts like start talking about it, I think that's going to help to grow it. I think that content itself is super important for growing the hobby and for therefore growing the niches within the hobby. And so you guys being Canadian, talking baseball, sometimes hockey is a good thing. We've obviously got the Gong Show. We've got Center Ice Cardcast. We've got myself. We've got Lapper. We've got, got the Cardboard Coaches. All these Canadian podcasts and content creators. I think that's good. But, to your question, I think, we're going to have to work harder to grow hockey in the US than any other sport would have to.
Right. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. It's too bad John, our other co-host, couldn't join because we call him our resident hockey guy. He knows the most about hockey cards, fellow Torontonian as well. And I'm sure he would have had a bunch of questions for you. But we're a big fan of the SP Authentic Future Watch autos. We just think they're so underrated, and that's why we're asking, like, when are our American friends gonna realize these cards are really nice and on card autos numbered to $9.99, and maybe we as investor types should start collecting those because relatively speaking they seem pretty cheap compared to higher end baseball cards and basketball cards. So yeah, hopefully the hockey card market will grow just outside of Canada. We always joke on our podcast too that the Sports Card Expo and is predominantly hockey card booths. And then I know you've been to the shows in the States. Like, how different is it actually from the shows in the States versus the shows in Canada in terms of what kind of cards the booths carry?
Well, so I've only really been to the National and the Burbank show in the States. Yeah, and then the Beckett Industry Summit Card Show, which is a smaller show, but the National is, I mean, that thing it's huge, and it's like everything is there, not just cards. And then there's, everything related to baseball, memorabilia, old bobbleheads, pins,
right,
tickets, cards. You see a lot of basketball there now. You see a ton of, there's just tons of vintage baseball at that show. Now we're seeing more and more modern come about. Even if you think about it, all the traditional auction houses, like the REAs and the Heritages and the Goldens. I mean, these auction houses used to be almost exclusively vintage, and now they're selling a ton of modern, right? Memory Lane, and they're doing a ton of modern now. So there's way more modern and, of course, ultra modern at the National. It's heavily baseball. I'd say it's like 50% baseball, maybe 60, and then the rest is split between, the next one would be basketball, then football, then hopefully hockey, although it might be soccer.
Right.
So,
wow.
But the National, have you guys been to the National ever?
No,
never.
Oh, you guys got to go. You got to get
to
Chicago. You got to go. You got to figure that out. Get down there one of these years as soon as you can. The Burbank show that I love, and I've never been to the Dallas show. I'd love to go to that, and I haven't been to the East Coast shows. But the Burbank show, it's got vintage, but it's mostly modern. A lot of modern. Of course, it's dominated by basketball, football, baseball. Not a lot of hockey, but there is some there still. So I love those shows. But to me, the Expo is the number one show in North America for a hockey collect. And I mean, it's not all hockey like it might have been 10 or 15 years ago. There's lots of baseball, basketball, football there.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, it's definitely changing, especially over the past few years, for sure. You know what? I just saw one of your latest Instagram videos, and I appreciated your take on the seemingly ongoing debate about the hobby, whether it should be just for collectors or for investors. I was wondering if you could just elaborate on that a bit here and address the fact that the hobby, as you state in the video, is this multi-billion-dollar business.
I mean, if you want to, you can, if you just want to be a practical realist and just kind of step outside of your very, and I mean, I'm speaking to anybody, step outside of your very narrow view, because we all have a pretty narrow view, right? Because all you see is what you see, and that's your tunnel vision. So if you step outside of that and think about it, like the hobby is actually built on a business. It was, and in that clip, that was a clip from one of my episode a couple Saturdays ago on Sports Cards Live. If you read what I wrote in the description, I actually say that, the hobby started as a business. It didn't start as a hobby. It started as a business, right? Cards were used to sell baking soda, and in the 1800s, among some other things, and then tobacco in the 1900s, and then chocolate bars in the 1920s, and then gum in the 1930s, and gum forever until it became the cards. And the cards only became the thing in like, I think 89 when Upper Deck came out. I don't even when Donruss and Fleer came around in 81 or 82 or 83, whatever year that was, I think there was gum in those packs. So, I mean, the gum was a bonus. At that point, it was more about the cards. I understand that. But like the hobby was created. The cards were created to sell other products. They were a premium to sell other products. So that's a business. And it's always been a business. There have always been companies that have been profit driven in the hobby. Now, collectors don't like to think of it as a business. We like to think of it as a hobby, and we seem to think that there's a divide there. Truth of the matter is, there's not a divide. You cannot separate the hobby from the business. I mean, unless you're strictly a collector who wants to collect his Topps baseball set or his O-Pee-Chee hockey or his Upper Deck flagship set every year. But still, you're going and you're buying the packs and you're paying for them, and those packs are sold by Upper Deck, which is a private company, profit driven. I mean, so, and then I go on to say, listen, if you want to collect as a hobby, go ahead. You can do that.
Yeah.
But then don't complain that it's just do that and enjoy it. Why do you have to complain? Oh, it's not a hobby anymore. It's a business.
Right.
Yeah.
Of course it is. No one's giving these things away for free unless you're getting them on Halloween, right?
Right.
But at the same time, if you want to go and invest in these things, you want to invest in cards, or you want to invest in, you want to build a company, or you want to invest when Fanatics goes public, you can invest in the hobby as well. And like I said at the very end of that clip, we'll see how that goes for you. Some people will be very successful and some people will lose their shirt, as we've seen over the past 3 years. So I just don't think that I just get kind of annoyed when I see people complaining that it's not a hobby anymore. They ruined the hobby. No, you allowed them to ruin the hobby for you.
Right. But they would be first to take the profit, though.
Of course, right? But anyone who complains that the hobby was ruined by business, you gave permission to those business people to ruin the hobby for you.
Right.
They didn't ruin it at you. You let them ruin it for you because they got into your head, and you don't need to do that.
Yeah. Jeremy, I appreciate that take because I agree with you 100%. And I don't know if you read your comments. I'm sure you got a lot of comments when you did that video from people who either agreed or disagreed with you. But would you say a lot of that feedback from that video, I don't know if you read those comments, but are they with you, or do you still hear those? Because I have my 5 Card Guys account is about 35,000 followers now. And every time I put a reel about anything that has a price on it, like, oh, this Kobe card went up to this high, it's come down to this low. And my point is like, oh, maybe it's a good buying opportunity. But I always get those 1 or 2 comments saying like, oh, see, all these investor types ruined it. Like, why can't I just collect these cards? This is stupid and all these things, right? But I wonder if you get similar feedback on your videos like that.
Well, I mean, on that clip, I got some private DMs, and then a couple of people shared it saying, spitting truth sort of thing. And I got some good feedback on that one. That one's got a good view count on Instagram for me. And
good.
So yeah, I mean, I don't know how you can disagree with it unless you literally have blinders on, or you just are not a realistic person. It's
gotcha.
Sounds about right. Hobby logic.
Hobby logic.
Yeah.
Oh, well, again, I appreciate that take. One aspect of the hobby from a business standpoint, speaking of hobby, seeing the hobby as a business, it's grading, which is a contentious issue. That's a contentious issue alone for some, especially when it comes to the big companies like PSA and even BGS. Common complaints are a lack of transparency in grading, ridiculous upcharges, turnaround times, mislabeling, and so on and so on. Do you think the hobby will ever get to a place where there is more trust in the process of grading? Because it's one of those things, it seems like it's easy to pick on and people love to complain about it.
Yeah, I mean, as long as the big grading companies are human graders, I don't know that we can. Trust is a tough word because I'm obviously affiliated with Tag Grading now, which is an automated grading system. We don't have humans assigning grades to cards. We have machines that do that now. And so I personally believe that with the grading I call it, the incumbent grading companies, they are human, and that is a limitation that they have. So it's impossible for them to be consistent.
Right.
It's and that's because they have moods. We have emotions. We have good days and bad days. Sure. And it's just hard to be consistent on such a subjective way to measure the condition of a card in such a short amount of time.
Right.
I mean, when some companies, or one of the companies, is grading over 1 million cards a month, if people have done the math, they can only spend 15, 20 seconds, 10 to 30 seconds, whatever it is, on a card. And I don't know that that's enough time. So personally, listen, I think they do the best they can under those really tough limitations that they're under.
Fair. Yeah.
But I think that the movement is going to go towards automated, objective, consistent, reproducible, transparent grading. That's what Tag has going for it.
Yep.
And I know that myself, as a collector, as an investor in sports cards, I only trust Tag grading as a grade. Now, Tag isn't grading vintage cards yet. Tag is doing 2004 right now. We'll be going back to 1989 by the end of this year. When Tag goes prior to 89, I'm not sure when that will be. Then I will trust them to be the only company to properly grade my pre-89 cards. But right now, if somebody buys a card graded by one of the bigger grading companies, I'm always curious to say let's break it out and let's see how good they did versus let's see how well Tag does. Tag knows how to grade. Tag's great. Tag did not set out to reinvent the grading standards. Tag took existing grading standards and applied automation so that we have consistency, transparency, reproducibility. So I think it's interesting to see how you can almost use Tag now to assess how good a card was graded by a human grading company. Did that answer your question, Clark?
It does. It makes sense to me. And I actually have a part 2 or part B to that question, because I feel competition is good for the hobby, especially when it comes to grading. But I'm not sure if you can answer this, but we've seen over and over again how difficult it is to take market share away from PSA, even if they provide a much better customer service experience or arguably a better looking slab or use AI technology to grade more fairly. So you're speaking about your partnership and how you're associated with Tag grading, which, you know what, by the way, the slabs do look amazing. I love the look of it. The clear, the transparent design, it's pretty awesome. And I think it deserves much more love. So that's a shout out to Tag grading. But what do you think it'll take for more collectors to even consider alternative grading companies?
Well, okay. So a couple things there. Great question. At Tag, we feel that we don't need to take away market share from PSA, BGS, SGC, CSG in order to be successful. There are enough hobbyists out there who have never trusted human grading companies.
Okay.
So they've been waiting for something like Tag. So that's one thing. You mentioned our slabs. Our slabs are so nice, so well made. They feel great in your hand. They're transparent. It's about the card, not the slab. There's no colored label. There's no black inlay. They really showcase the slab nicely. The other thing, and this is the important one, I believe, is that we have, despite where the market's gone in the last couple of years, there are still people putting a lot of money into sports cards. And I think eventually people are going to want to know what they're getting accurately instead of what I like to call the spin the wheel service you get with the other grading companies.
Right.
So if I'm going to put out 6 figures into a card that's in a Gem Mint 10 holder or a pristine 10 holder or whatever company it might be, and I know that card might have been in a mint holder a few months. That same card might have been in a mint holder. Which is it? Is it a mint card or a Gem Mint card? I'm gonna want the one company who actually grades accurately and consistently to tell me what it really is. So I think that once the people paying big money for cards and they're starting to understand just how good Tag is at grading and consistent, once they almost demand a Tag grade on the big cards, that's when it'll trickle down. And so there's that. And I can listen, obviously I'm very bullish on Tag, but I also have a very extensive collection of cards in PSA and BGS, a couple SGC slabs, a couple CSG slabs as well. But I really think that that's where it's going to go. I mean, that's the way the world works. We are always evolving. And a lot of people say, well, PSA is an example. They're too big now, too big to fail. Well, not so true. Blockbuster was pretty big as well. Taxi services were pretty big as well. America Online was pretty big as well. So just because, the bigger they are, the harder they fall. I'm 6.5 feet tall. You've probably seen me before. People tell me that all the time.
You tower over people.
Right? So, they're not untouchable. But in addition to people at the high end demanding consistent and accurate and reproducible and transparent grading, we are seeing in our early life right now, we've got a lot of very passionate fans of tag who just love what we're doing, and they're cracking their PSA or Beckett slabs to find out what they actually have.
Right. Yeah.
But the problem is right now, not the problem, but I guess one of the challenges we have is that so many people in the hobby don't really care what card is in the slab. They just want to know what the grade is on the PSA Beckett SGC CSG slab. Right. They don't care what the card is. And I think over time, people will start to care more about the card and less about the grading company.
Right.
Makes sense.
Yeah, good point. What do you think about people that say that essentially buy the grade but not the card at this point? Because there's a lot, right?
A lot of people do that, especially people who like are competing on the PSA set registry. Right. They don't even care about the card. I think that they're being short-sighted. That's it. I just think they're being short-sighted. I'm a big fan of buying the card, not the grade. Yep. And if it's in a holder you don't like, you can take it out and submit it to the holder company you do like.
Yeah.
But like I have in my vintage collection, I have PSA 5s that are nicer than PSA 7s. And that's kind of it's an opportunity for people. You can save a lot of money by shopping that way for your collection. And there's some people that have built beautiful collections with lower grade cards. They're saving money. And especially when you think of centering, you can get PSA 7s and 8s and even 9s are off centered all the time. You can get PSA 6 that just presents so much nicer at arm's length. As soon as you pull out your loop and you start looking at it under the microscope, you're seeing some of these flaws, but they're harder to see. So I'm all about buying the card, not the grade.
Yeah. Cool. That's what we preach here too, for sure. You mentioned, yes. We encourage all our listeners to do the same. You mentioned at the beginning part of this interview, just your content creation process, how you got into it. And obviously you have a wealth of experience in the hobby to talk about. So that's worked out for you. And you've made many connections in the hobby and built up credibility where you're able to get so many great guests on Sports Card Live, which is amazing. How have you found that part of the hobby? Just curious, as content creators ourselves, just being one of the main voices in the hobby now. And I know you only started in 2020, but it's crazy how much you've grown even in the last 3 years. We're at 2023 now, obviously. And how would you describe that experience and just being one of the main influencers, I would say? I don't know if you like that word. That's a some people don't like that word.
It kind of is what it is at this point. I only try to influence people to enjoy the hobby, collect what they like. Once in a while I will say that this is a great card. This is a great card in this grade. If anyone wants to buy it, that would have my blessing, that kind of thing. But I don't pump any cards. I show cards from my own collection on my socials once in a while. And if that influences somebody, I mean, that's fine. I'm not going to stop showing my mail days because I got to fear that, we're under the microscope as content creators a lot of the time. And so I do still not post everything I would if I wasn't a content creator, but I love it. Honestly, it's so much fun. Like you said, I get great guests on my show, and I get, at the beginning, I had to put out a lot of effort to get guests. I had to send out messages, emails, phone calls, whatever it took, go to shows and meet people. And it was great. I barely ever got a no, but now it's got to the point where I don't have to go searching out guests anymore. And this has been going on for a couple of years now, at least a year and a half, where they come to me and big names come to me. I get PR firms for companies coming to me saying, "Hey, will you have our CEO on your show or this or that person?"
Right. Yeah.
And I'm like, sure. Let's meet. And, it's really cool to know that, when I had Gary Vee on the show, and I know he's a polarizing figure, but he's a big name. He's got
absolutely
millions of followers. So getting him on the show was big for me. Jeff Wilson, Sports Card Investor, has the biggest sports card YouTube channel now, over 250,000, I think, subscribers. And, another polarizing figure. But to get on his show and having him on my show, part of, there's some strategy to that. And, part of it is, I want to get more exposure. So being on his channel puts me in front of people, helps me get more subscribers. Having him on my channel does this. I mean, obviously it's better for me than for him, but I think it does work both ways to a degree.
For sure.
And it also then exposes more people to my thought processes, my experience, and just my thoughts on the hobby. And I think it's good for all content creators to collaborate and share, because you are providing your audience with more content, even though it's not just your own. As soon as we don't want to share and tell people about what we're, other channels or podcasts, I think you're really limiting your audience's exposure to more hobby thoughts and ideas, because not everyone's going to resonate with what you're saying or what I'm saying or what anyone is saying. Yeah. So,
absolutely. Yeah. No, I love it. And that's why we really appreciate you coming on, because with your audience and, a lot of people I know wanted to hear from you. And like you're talking about the different guests you've had on your show. Is there one that sticks out for you? Any really interesting guests that you had on your show? Just in terms of what you're talking about and their perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of put my guests in three different buckets. I've got industry insiders, passionate collectors, and other content creators. And some people fill two of the buckets, some fill all three. And I've had over 250 people on my channel, Amazing. On my different shows now. So I get asked this question quite a bit, and I don't want to duck the question, but it's a hard one for me to answer, because honestly, I can't remember every episode I've done, and I can't remember all the conversations I've had with everybody.
Right.
They're all every episode I've done has nuggets of things I really like, and I learned something from everybody. Dr. Beckett, having him on my show, that's cool. I had him on episode number 30, and I've had him on 4 more. I've had him on 5 times. He's always a really great person to talk to. Talk about experience and being an OG. Brian Gray from Leaf is so animated and such a character, and the audience loves him. He's just a lot of fun to have on the show. The episode I did 2 weeks ago with the president of Upper Deck, Jason Mashara, I mean, that was a great episode. He was so free speaking, and he was a great guest that time. Mm-hmm. And it was the second time he's been on. I've had many people on from Upper Deck. Gary V was just a nice feather in the cap, and Gary's got a great perspective on things, because he's not just immersed in the hobby like I am. He's immersed in all marketing, social media, building IP with his V friends. He's a smart guy, despite people who may not like him or think that he's done some bad things in the like pump and dump or whatever. I don't think that he personally goes out to pump and dump. I think he just likes cards, So having him on was a big one. Patrick Bet-David, I mean,
that's
he's
cool.
a beast. Yeah,
of course.
He's one of my favorites.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That was huge. Having him on was amazing. And I'll tell you one thing about having him on was that all but 2 or 3 of my guests, I pre-plan with. I meet with them first, so that the first time I'm on screen with them isn't the first time I've met them. I like to build some rapport.
Okay.
Well, Patrick Bet-David, Gary V as well. Gary, I knew. I've met him in person a few times. But Patrick Bet-David, I'd never met, and I didn't say a word to him until we went live on the show.
Wow. Okay.
So to prepare for that one, I went and I watched a bunch of his interviews that he had done, because he's a master interviewer.
Yeah.
Right.
And I studied his style, and then I emulated it. The technique of mirroring.
Yeah.
In terms of I tried to mirror him when I interviewed him. And then at the end of the interview, he basically, before he signed off, he goes, I forget his exact words, but you could watch it at the end of that episode. He's like, by the way, great job interviewing me. Great order of questioning. You did a really good job. And I was like, oh, that was one of the best compliments I could have ever received.
That's awesome.
Huge compliment.
But I've had on some collector guests who just, my collector focus episodes, the audience loves those a lot. So I don't want to get any more detailed now. I don't want to leave anybody out. I've got so many great episodes.
Yeah, you had a ton of guests, so that's fair. Absolutely fair. And Yeah, no, I was just gonna say when you're talking about your experience with interviewing Patrick Bet-David, like I'm a former journalist, so you're employing professional journalism techniques there. So
Yeah.
And I'm an accountant by trade. When I did my, like, guys, people always say to me, like, do you have training? Like how did you learn how to interview? Dr. Beckett actually paid me the highest compliment, not directly to me, but Rich Klein, if you're familiar with Rich Klein, who's another OG, worked at Beckett back in the day with Dr. Beckett. He's told me on a couple of occasions that Dr. Beckett says to him, and he said a few times out loud on Hobby Hotline, a show that he's involved with. He said that, and I mean, I haven't actually heard him say this myself, but I've heard other people tell me he says this, that Jeremy Lee is the gold standard in hobby interviewers or podcast hosts or whatever it is. And I mean, that is like super high praise.
Yeah.
And I have no experience except what I've done on my channel. Like, super flattering and grateful that he's seen that in me and said it and let me know, because that kind of validates a lot of what I do.
Definitely. And definitely I would agree. Yeah. Like, I think, just having so many guests and having done so many shows, you just seem to get better at it when you grow in confidence and just getting used to the format. And just as it becomes like, we always joke about our first episode, like how rigid we were and, oh, are we doing it right? And then later on, it's just like, we could just come on at any point and just talk about cards, as long as we have kind of a loose structure of what we're going to talk about. And it's just really talking with friends at that point.
Yeah, it's exactly right. I've never gone back and watched my early episodes. I'm too nervous to.
Same.
And when I don't know, for the first 30 or 25 episodes, I used to get, like, leading up on Saturday night, I'd get butterflies in my stomach. I'd be nervous. I'd try not to think about it. Yeah. Now I don't get nervous at all. And the other thing is that you mentioned, like, you just want to get better. That's one of my mottos, is just always try and continuously improve. And if somebody out there listening to this is like, I'd like to start a podcast, but I'm not ready yet. Yes, you are.
Yeah.
You just have to start. Starting is the hardest part, right? If you just start and do it, you'll be that much closer to being better and better at it, to seeing improvement. So I always encourage people, like,
I love that.
If you're passionate, if you're passionate and you are authentic and you have some subject matter expertise in this hobby, start a podcast. Why not? I mean,
absolutely.
But start it. Just do it. As uncomfortable as it is, force yourself to do it.
Yeah, 100% agree. That reminds us when we had Denny, Denny _cards, and he was just a collector, and we told him the same thing. It's like he was thinking about doing a podcast. So I'm like, we just told him, just do it. Think about it later, just do it, and then you can improve over time. He's off to the races. If you see his channel, he's getting guests on his show, and yeah, we love it. We just encourage. We always say too, more hobby content, the better. And I think you echoed that sentiment when you're answering this question, because we don't always have to agree on certain hobby topics, and it's always great to hear different points of view. And I've heard you on Sports Card Nonsense. I listen to so many other sports card podcasts just to hear other people's points of views. I agree with some, I don't agree with others, but I love just listening about the hobby, and that's what makes it fun. Agreed.
Yeah.
All right, just to wrap up the interview, I was wondering if we can end by asking just a few rapid fire questions. Is that all right? Okay. We'd like to do this with all our guests. And we always ask this. This is a standard one. What's your favorite, I don't know if you can choose, but what's your favorite PC card?
My go-to answer is my 1948 Leaf Jackie Robinson rookie
Amazing.
card.
Yeah. It's a grail card for me. All right. We didn't really talk about this, but Fanatics, good or bad for the hobby?
Good.
Okay. Nice. We talked about this. This is kind of in jest, but do you think Upper Deck will be acquired by Fanatics at some point?
No.
Okay. Any particular reason why? Do you think that's they're
I
off
asked
limits?
the president of Upper Deck 2 Saturdays ago if they would be acquired by Fanatics, and he said no.
He said no. There you go.
That's
direct from the source.
That's definitive. I missed
and I asked
that
him
part.
why. And he said, I asked him, well, why not? And he said, because it's not for sale. It's a legacy company. It's family owned. They don't want to sell the company. So
it's family owned. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. What state do you think the hobby will be in, say, 10, 15 years?
Gosh, tougher question to answer, but I think it'll be more mainstream than it is today. Mm-hmm. And I think, this is one of my kind of quotes, as long as there are sports, there will be cards. And as long as there are people, there will be collectors. So I think that the hobby will continue to be a going concern. It's been a going concern for over 100 years. It's not something new. It's not, a lot of people think it's new, but it's not. It's been around a long time. It's going to continue to be around. And regardless of what Fanatics does, Fanatics is only going to impact the future. They're not going to have an impact on the cards that have come out from 1888 until 2023, really.
Right.
So there's always going to be that whole body of work for people to focus on and collect. And it's related to history and nostalgia. People love history. People love nostalgia. So
absolutely. I didn't have this question set, but your answer made me think of this. In retrospect, when you're collecting, when you first started collecting and you had your sports card store in the 90s and where we are today in terms of the hobby, did you ever think that it would turn out like this, where we are right now in terms of hobby content, everything else?
Never. Because I didn't know that we'd have an internet, right?
That's a key part.
And I didn't know that we'd have a global economy, and I didn't know here's the key, guy. Like podcasts and YouTube is such a powerful thing. The fact that anybody can have a channel. Back when I was growing up in the 80s and I turned on my TV set, there were 12 or 13 channels in the world, like in my world, where I 13 channels. That was it. Now there's millions of channels available. So the fact that anybody can have a channel and broadcast, you don't have to be a star. You don't have to be discovered. You can just go live and have a channel.
I love it.
I think that social media is integral to growing the hobby because it just makes knowledge and information so much more accessible.
100%.
Yeah, it's definitely democratized for sure. I love that about the hobby now. Last question. We usually, for the last rapid fire question, we mentioned, most of our guests are American, so we always make it Canadian centric. We always sometimes ask, who's your favorite Canadian athlete, or do you collect any Raptors or Blue Jays? But since you are a Canadian yourself, we're gonna make this Toronto centric because we know you're not from Toronto. So, honest answer: will the Toronto Maple Leafs win a Stanley Cup within the next 5 years?
I hope so. Honestly, I hope so. Will they? I think they're in the. Listen, I think a lot of Leafs fans don't know how good they got it with Brad Treliving. A lot of Leaf fans think, oh, how could he trade away Matthew Tkachuk for Huberdeau? Well, guys, Tkachuk was leaving. He was forced to trade away Tkachuk. What did he do? He went out and got the third highest leading scorer in the NHL.
Yeah,
no one else would have pulled out. Treliving is an amazing general manager.
Love to hear it.
And if you guys are Leaf fans or your listeners are Leaf fans, you guys are so much luckier than you think you are. He's way better than Dubas ever was. He knows. You guys are so lucky, and trust me, I know. I'm in Calgary. He was our GM for a long time, and he did a couple of mistakes along the way, but much more good than bad. So I think the Leafs have the best chance now that they've ever had to win a cup within the next 5 years. Do I think they will? I think you guys are close. You just need a goalie, really. You need a freaking goalie.
It's been a revolving door on that front in net. So
Anderson was the one that they let him got. He's the one that got away, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Or if you look back, when we did have good goalies like Belfour and Cujo, we didn't have a good core four, as we would say now.
Yeah.
In terms it's all about timing, I suppose.
And core four is too much for a core, really, but.
Right. Fair enough. Well, there you go, Leafs fans. You heard it from Jeremy. He thinks we got a shot. So hopefully that's the case. And we got a good GM. So I'm really excited about this upcoming season. Jeremy, we know your time is valuable. So we really, really appreciate you coming on today. And I'm sure we'll cross paths in the hobby, especially since we're all Canadian collectors here.
Well, thank you guys I had a lot of fun with you guys. So thanks for having me. And all the best with your collections and with your content as you your podcast as you and thank you to your listeners for giving me their time as well.
Thank you. All right, that was a great interview with Jeremy Lee. Again, we'd like to thank him for his time. I know he's a busy guy. He's doing a lot of interviews himself and he's creating content. So we do definitely appreciate his time and his insight into the hobby, and I hope you guys enjoyed that interview. All right, let's finish off this episode with our regular weekly segment we call Pick One. And this is where each of us, we choose 2 players or 2 cards, and then we debate which one we would rather invest in. And if you missed last week's episode, we decided not to tell each other what we're going to put up for debate. So this is our kind of gut reaction to these Pick One picks. All right, so Hyung, do you want to start things off?
Sure. We talked about Corbin Carroll earlier. We mentioned BGS 9.5 was 500. Let's go with the grade, since we talked about grading too and how subjective it is. Let's go. So Corbin Carroll's PSA 10 recently sold for $1,200. Just to give you an idea of value of BGS 9.5, okay? Base auto of his Bowman Chrome. So $1,200 was his last sale, PSA 10. Are you investing in Corbin Carroll right now? If it was the Bowman Chrome first, his 2019, versus I'm going to throw out Wander Franco's Bowman Chrome first. So it came out of the same year, 2019. His last sold actually were $930 US and $1,025 for PSA 10. Whoa. So Corbin Carroll is actually more expensive than Wander Franco. Just to give but there's buying opportunities. Like you said, you found a good 9.5 for 500. That might be a great buying opportunity, in my opinion, because you're buying the card, not the grade. Or kind of both, right? So, which way are you going to go? Are you going to go with the young stud, the power potential, as we like to call it, or you're going to go with Wander Franco, who's looking like he's putting up his season as well? Who are you guys picking?
I'm going to go with Wander Franco. And I think he has been enough of a darling to the hobby. Yeah, we've talked about this many times. The power potential, the sexy home runs, it's not there. So, the upper echelon of hobby hype may not appear for Wander, but I think he's had enough of his own hobby hype, and he was enough of a darling to kind of carry him if he continues down this path of maybe being like a mini Ichiro or something like that, really batting for some good average numbers. Corbin Carroll, everything you guys have mentioned so far about Corbin Carroll, like, it seems amazing. Like, especially if he continues to pan out and he continues this trajectory. But I mean, he's young. We have to assume he's going to have struggles. Perhaps his first year is going to maybe be a bit of an anomaly, and he's on fire this year. And then pitchers eventually start to learn some of his habits. And I think his second and third years could be a bit rough, right? So I think you're kind of buying into the hype right now of Corbin Carroll. He's kind of been a bit of the talk of the town. Obviously, Ohtani's like the major talk of the town. And right below it is probably somebody like Corbin Carroll. So I would say there's enough hype for me that I would automatically choose the other side, and that's Wander Franco for me.
This was a tough one.
It's tough.
I definitely agree with you, John. Like, you're definitely buying, I guess, a little high with Corbin Carroll. But then, like, I try to think about who has the upside. Like, Franco's obviously trending downward, whereas Corbin Carroll is trending upward. And the question is, how much more up can he go, right? True. And I was just looking at the stats. So Wander Franco has 8 home runs. He's pretty much batting 300 with 22 stolen bases. And then, Corbin Carroll's like 15-15 right now, right? With more power. So I'm going to go with Corbin Carroll. I'm swinging for the fences with this kid. The power upside, I think at the end of the day, I don't know, Tampa Bay is kind of like, they get no love, right? They're always a competitive team. And, we know as Jays fans, the Tampa Bay Rays, they always somehow manage to be really competitive with their players. And even the players, they play like a team. So there's no like one superstar. I guess Wander Franco will be the closest. But even then, that's, and I think Corbin Carroll still has the rookie hype. he wins Rookie of the Year, there might be a little bump there. So I'm going to go with Corbin Carroll, although he is more expensive, and although I generally hate buying high on cards, I think he just has higher upside in the short term. So that's why I'm going with Carroll.
Nice. So yeah, like this, we talked about Wander a lot. You know my issues with Wander, and I just looked up. I'm on Baseball Reference right now, and I just see what stands out to me is, you know, he's been in the big league since he was 20. He still has not played a full season. So Wander's 22 years old. So similar to kind of like Luis Robert, he put together half a season every year for the last 3 seasons, and he's there right now. But his 162 game average is like 286, 16 home runs, 77 RBIs. And before he even made the big leagues, I remember when we were launching, we're like, what type of player is Wander Franco? He's a 280, 20 home runs if he's lucky, 80 RBIs. Will that get hobby love? Fast forward to 3 years now, or 2 years last when Wander made his debut, when we were talking about it, it's the same thing now. Now you're looking at the numbers that we've discussed, and now prices are correcting itself. So that kind of worries me. I think, Clark, you hit it on the spot in terms of the hype of Corbin Carroll. And I think Corbin Carroll was so slept on because 2019 draft wasn't like, you had Adley, you had, right, guys like Corbin Carroll, but they weren't really the chase because 2019 is like Wander Franco, Noel V. Marte, like all these stud right, prospects, that weren't in the draft, right? So I think there was a lot of hobby hype around the prospecting side, and Corbin Carroll and Adley and all these other guys like Gunnar Henderson, they didn't really get the love out of draft. So I think there's somewhat of a buying opportunity because I don't think Carroll's prices ever hit like crazy. I think he went through periods of, okay, he's killing the minors, he's a big prospect, and then it's like back down, no love. And then now it's to the point where his prices are kind of holding. So even though you're buying in a little higher, I feel like it's a little more safer based on his production than ever before. So it's looking like more of okay, this guy's going to end up hitting 300 with 30 home runs as a rookie. That's not too bad, right? So I like the upside with Corbin Carroll. The power was a concern. I remember I comped him as kind of like a Johnny Damon, like a more athletic version of Johnny Damon, if that even makes sense. Right. But in Johnny Damon's peak, this guy's hitting 25 plus bombs, hitting 300 every year. So it's kind of like that comp I had, but hey, he might be better, so there's that. So yeah, I'm going to go with Corbin Carroll, even though it's a little expensive. Like I said, you're buying into the hype. 1,200 is a little too much in my opinion, but what we're talking about before that, BGS 9.5 for 500 looks very, very nice.
Cool. I like that. We said this last week, and I'll go next, Johnny, because we said this last week.
We'll double up. Sorry, did I double up yours? Sorry, man. Maybe you got to make me stop going first.
I'm gonna have to randomize next time. But I'll go with mine. So I was talking about the Corbin Carroll 2019. This is a Corbin Carroll episode, guys.
I like it. Yeah.
The 2019 Bowman Chrome first auto BGS 9.5. We talked about it. $500. Would you want 2 of those? Okay, so that's $1,000 budget right now. Or do you want a Bobby Witt Jr. 2020 Bowman Chrome prospect first auto refractor numbered to 499, a PSA 10, going for $1,000 now. It dropped significantly over the last few months. One of those versus 2 Corbin Carroll BGS 9.5 base autos.
I'll go first. Very similar to the Wander Franco. I think for me, I'm just trying to avoid the current hype. I think picking Corbin Carroll over Wander because of the home run potential and all of that jazz, I'm on board with that. I like it. I was one to not like Wander because of the home run or lack thereof home run potential, right? And this one, again, I think it's a similar situation. I think can make sense to pick Corbin Carroll as a player, long-term, et cetera, but I just can't. I don't want to buy into the current trajectory and the hype. So it's an easy one to go the other way and go Bobby Witt. And I like Bobby Witt too. And I've always kind of wanted one of his cards, and the fact that his one of his big boy cards is like $1,000, I think that's pretty good value, to be honest.
Okay.
No idea how he's playing. I assume he's not playing.
He's doing okay.
All that
no, he's
amazing.
playing well.
He's playing well.
11 homers, 21 stolen bases. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
And
okay.
244 batting average though, but.
So I have one nice Bobby Witt card.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not gonna say I've been happy with Bobby Witt's performance. Like I mean Kansas City's so bad. Like they're tough to watch. And I was hoping that Bobby Witt could be that savior. But I'm on the Corbin Carroll hype. This is a Corbin Carroll show, right? This episode's Corbin Carroll, so it's sponsored by Corbin Carroll. I have to go, two BGS 9.5s, because I'm probably gonna sell one early, make the 1,000 back, and then I'll be in with house money. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I like that.
Man, you FOMO dogs. I know exactly. I know where Clark's going. I know what he's gonna pick.
Oh man, I'm still on the fence. Okay, going into this when I was deciding to pick one, like for me it was an easy Corbin Carroll. 2 of them, $500. It's a great deal. BGS 9.5, and I hate paying for the grade. Yeah, I'm gonna stick with Corbin Carroll. But there was a part of me. There was a part of me that's like, Bobby Witt, 11 home runs, 21 stolen bases. That's not bad. He's going to hit 20 plus, and he's going to steal 30 plus again. Yeah, so he's 20-30, just like last year, right? Yeah. And 499 is numbered. So yeah, there was part of me that was wanting to choose Bobby Witt, but I think the PSA 10 got me. I don't want to buy it for the grade, like that kicker. So forget it. I'm going to choose Corbin Carroll. 2 of them. Sounds good to me.
Nice.
All right. Good one. Okay,
right,
Johnny,
yep.
You got a Corbin Carroll too?
So I got Corbin Carroll. No, just joking. So I got an ugly one. You're going to hate me. So we're going to go in the current state of the hobby, which of these 2 is the better investment or will have better ROI? Strictly investment. Mm-hmm. Non-pop culture, so we're talking sports cards, Leaf autos, right? Okay. Versus the base game.
Oof. It's easy for me.
Me too.
Yeah, I'm out of the base game. I'm just saying, I'm out of the base game. Like, I can't collect base. You know what I've been doing with my base, actually?
You guys like Leaf autos?
I don't, but I don't like base. Like, it's like, pick your poison.
Yeah. Leaf auto all the way, yeah.
Right? Like, yeah, because the auto's like more, like there's a lot more value in that, right? But I will say, just on the base cards, hey, it's not a bad idea to collect the base, PSA 10. It's worth nothing right now. Just, slide it under, just lock it up, see where it goes. It's worth $10 right now. Maybe it's worth $50 in 10 years. So you'd 5x your money in 10 years.
Or it's worth $1.
You're right. But I mean, that's why you have to be like a meaningful Ohtani base or whatever. But regardless, right. I was saying the reason why I was saying it is because you do it like a collection for like a friend's kid or something, or you have a niece or your godfather or something. It's like you stack away these base, right? Well, think if you had a bunch of OPG cards or whatever junk wax era now that was passed down like 20 years ago, you'd probably do pretty well.
Meaningful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay. But yeah, I'm still going Leaf auto.
Yeah, me too. Out of the base game.
Dang, that was a lot
out of the base game.
I was actually gonna pick base, but you guys kind of convinced me.
I
hate Leaf. I hate Leaf autos.
Okay. They're all sticker too, anyway.
They're all stickers.
I have a bunch of base if you need.
The value goes down. Yeah, there's just no appeal. I think I don't know. There's something to say that because there is a market even still for base and like very, very low end, right? Like even when you go to these shows, these days you're seeing a lot of like dollar bins moving, $5 bins or $10 bins that have slabs. They're moving quick, right? Actually, most people are probably making their money off of that kind of stuff, right? And Leaf autos, I mean, maybe a Leaf auto will be worth $100, maybe more. It's tough to move though, right? It doesn't, I think the liquidity on a Leaf auto is a little bit different. So, But that, I mean, if we're talking investment and return, yeah, it's tough. And I think you can pick you can pick your poison on decent leaf autos. I hate to say, but yeah, I'm gonna give it a sweep. It's gonna be leaf autos for me too. I hate to say that though. Oh.
Well, from personal experience too, like I've lost so much money on base.
Oh, me too.
We've all done the base game, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just brutal. So learned our lesson. I like that one though. All right, yeah, that's the end of today's episode. Really appreciate Jeremy one more time coming on the show, and I hope you guys enjoyed the episode. If you did, we really appreciate you giving us 5 stars wherever you listen to your podcast. And yeah, we'll have a new episode for you on Friday. Bye. Hey, thanks for listening to Cards to the Moon. We'd really appreciate you subscribing to our podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts. And you can also connect with each of us on Instagram at 5cardguys, or you can follow Hyung at Integrity Sports Cards, or John at TradeU at Recess. You can also check us out at 5cardguys.com. Thanks again, and hope to connect soon.